Hello and welcome. I am George Stephen Pinto from Government PU College, Malpe. I have previously engaged with you on the chapter on the topic circular motion. My today's topic is more or less on the same lines, except that it is part of a chapter, system of particles and rotation. The first part of this was completed by Madam Priyakarani Jain. She has taught you about the center of mass concepts and its center of mass motion. Then she must have taught you about the kinematics of rotation, angular velocity, angular acceleration, average angular acceleration, and so on and so forth. I am continuing from where she has left. Today we shall start with moment of inertia. Moment of inertia. Rotational inertia is another name given to it. Rotational inertia. As you are very well aware, greater the mass of a body, greater the force you require to move it. For example, you require smaller force here to set it in motion. Here you require larger force to set it in motion. So, the mass of the body here or there is a measure of inertia, translational inertia we might call it. The greater the mass the body has, greater force you would need to set it in motion. That's why we say mass is an inertial property. In much the same way, if you have a rod, look at that, both of them are of the same mass, but the lengths are different. Here it is having bit larger length than here. So what do you see? Greater the length, harder it is to spin in your hand. Try to spin it in your hand. ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ತಿರುಗಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡಿ. ಈ ಕೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಈ ಕೇಸಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಮಗೆ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಎಫರ್ಟ್ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ. What it simply means is that even though mass is same, length being different, there is larger rotational inertia here than here. This rotational inertia is called moment of inertia, and that is a physical quantity. Now, how do we define moment of inertia of a sphere, for example? Consider an example of a fellow participating in what is called as hammer throw. All of us are aware of hammer throw. All of us have seen a hammer throw event in Olympics. So what happens is that there is a long chain to the end of which you have a heavy sphere. You need to set it in rotation, spin, spin, spin so many times, and then eventually release into air. The sphere that reaches the furthest distance on the ground, that athlete will be considered as a winner. Whatever the case is, obviously, the longer the chain you take, greater the radius of the circle that is going to be, greater this radius, harder it is to rotate, greater will be the rotational inertia. Okay, so the greater the length, the circle, harder it is to rotate or harder it is to spin. And therefore, we call this quantity which gives rotational inertia to the body as moment of inertia, as I have already titled here. This moment of inertia I depends on two parameters. One is mass, of course. Of course, you have heavier the ball there in the hammer throw, more difficult will be for you to set it in rotation. So, greater the moment of mass, greater will be the moment of inertia. Moment of inertia will have a symbol capital I. Second, longer the chain length, longer the radius, longer the distance from the center of the circle to the object, greater will be the moment of inertia. So I is proportional to r squared. If you club both of these together, we get I proportional to mr squared. Now we can replace this proportionality sign by having an equality sign. Here we have, by considering or invoking a proportionality constant which also includes 1. Therefore, I equals mr squared. So, if you have a particle going in a circular path having a mass m, having a circular radius of r, the moment of inertia about the axis, call it xx dash if you want, is mr square. So what is SI unit? SI unit of moment of inertia, from now on we shall consider that as MI, not Mumbai Indians, but moment of inertia. MI is kilogram for mass and R is in meter, kilogram meter squared. So the dimensional formula of the moment of inertia is very easy. Kg mass, length L square. There is no dimension in time though. And unfortunately it is neither a scalar nor a vector. Moment of inertia is another kind of physical quantity called a tensor. What is it? We will not bother about it, but it is a tensor other than scalar and vector. Usually scalar is a tensor of rank 0, vector is a tensor of rank 1, and any other tensor of higher rank is called usually a tensor, and moment of inertia is a tensor. What if you have multiple bodies, multiple objects, multiple particles, all spinning about this common axis, call it xx dash. They have different radii, as you can see. The first one is having radius r1, perhaps having mass m1. The second one is having radius r2, the mass of which is m2. And there are n number of particles, all of them haven't shown. This is the nth particle here, having a mass mn at a perpendicular distance Rn, or the radius of the circle is Rn. I've already told you it is neither a vector nor a scalar, but when you add moment of inertia, you add them as though they are scalars. So adding therefore doesn't require any direction to be taken into account. So total moment of inertia of n particle system can then be generalized as follows. I equals m1 r1 squared, which is the moment of inertia of the first one about the axis xx dash. The second one m2 r2 square, and so on. This goes on up to mn rn square. In our high school, we have been told how to shorten the whole thing. You can write this in brief by introducing a summation sign where I goes from 1 to n mi ri squared. So far, so good. This will help us to find moment of inertia of not just one particle, but any number of particles, provided all of them have the same axis of rotation. Now, what if you have a spinning wheel? How do you find the moment of inertia of this? This is not a discrete system of particles. This is a continuous system of particles. Earlier we saw there was one particle there, another particle here, third particle here, fourth particle here. This is called a discrete system of particles. Discrete system of particles. Whereas what we have now, this wheel is made up of a continuous mass distribution. So continuous mass distribution, and therefore how do we find the moment of inertia of such a body? Or for example, or for that matter, here is an athlete, here is a basketball player spinning a basketball in his finger. So how to find the moment of inertia about the axis about which it is spinning? Or for that matter, how to find the moment of inertia of a ceiling fan that is spinning about the vertical axis of the axle over there. In all these cases, you have to consider a formula for moment of inertia for continuous mass distribution. So imagine this is a continuous mass distribution now, okay, and here we have an axis. About this axis, the whole body is spinning. We might think of a small segment here or a small piece of this having a mass, let's say dm, at a perpendicular distance of r. The moment of inertia, this is like a small particle now, which is part of this larger continuous body. So how do I find the moment of inertia of that? Since mass is itself small, the moment of inertia it contributes to is also small. Di is therefore mass times perpendicular distance squared. How do I get the total moment of inertia? In that case, we have to integrate it. Integral of di, which is integral of dm times r squared. So, in order to find the moment of inertia of a continuous body, this is a formula for finding moment of inertia of a continuous body. You know what is the difference between continuous mass system and discrete mass system? Continuous mass system is like a piece of clay, ಕುಂಬಾರನ ಕೈಲಿರ್ತಕ್ಕಂಥ ಜೇಡಿ ಮಣ್ಣು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಬಹುದು. That is a continuous. A heap full of sugar or salt crystals is discrete mass distribution, because you can basically identify one crystal, another crystal, and so on like that. That is called discrete mass distribution and continuous mass distribution. In continuous mass distribution case, this is how you will find moment of inertia using integral form. So, you can derive an expression for moment of inertia for any mass distribution system. For example, here I am trying to find the moment of inertia of a thin rod whose axis of rotation passes right through the center and perpendicular to the length. Let us consider one such rod. What I am right now talking about, this part is definitely not going to be asked in the examination. If you want to learn it, you are free to learn it at your own interest, else you can skip this part. But I would like to tell you how that expression I equals integral of dmr square is going to be useful. So what we are going to do is, we are going to consider this as an axis of rotation. The total length is capital L. So we might call this r axis, radial axis. So therefore, at a distance r away or s away, whatever the distance is, s away, okay, this width is ds. S away, there is a small element having mass dm. Now, as the whole rod is spinning, so is this tiny particle spinning. So we shall find the moment of inertia of this alone, then we shall integrate it, we will get the total moment of inertia. Very easy. Okay, what is that mass dm in it? We know the length of it. Since it is a uniform rod, the total mass divided by total length, if I call that total mass capital M, total mass divided by total length equals mass of this divided by its length. Meaning, m divided by L equals dm over ds. So that gives us dm equals m over L times ds. Now how to find moment of inertia? I know I equals integral of dm times r squared. R is now replaced by s squared, that is dm is m over L times ds times s squared. Now m over L is a constant. I can safely bring it out of the integral. That gives me s square ds. Mind you, if I find the moment of inertia between 0 to L by 2, for example, that will give me only the moment of inertia of half the rod. I have to find the total. Total, how do I do? I find the moment of inertia of this part, I find the moment of inertia of this part, then I add them. Fortunately, due to the symmetry, notice that this axis is symmetry axis. Moment of inertia of this about this axis, moment of inertia of this piece about the same axis is the same. Therefore, the total moment of inertia is twice the moment of inertia of this part alone. In other words, it is 2 times m over L into integral of s square ds. The limits go all the way from 0 to L over 2. Now, integral of x to the power of n with respect to x is x to the power of n plus 1 divided by n plus 1, provided n is not equal to minus 1. So, that being the formula, if I replace n by 2, then it is going to be 2 plus 1 divided by 2 plus 1, x cube divided by 3. In this case, it is s cube divided by 3, 2m over L, s cube over 3, between the limits 0 to L by 2. Last but not the least, now you apply the limits. Therefore, the total moment of inertia I equals 2m over 3L is s cube, upper limit, L by 2 the whole cube, minus lower limit 0 cube, because lower limit is 0 there. So, you see upper limit L cube divided by 8, 2m over 3L, L cube divided by 8. Certain things cancel out, right? 2 1s are, 2 4s are, 1L cancels it with 1L, and then 2 3 4s are 12. So, m L square divided by 12. So, this might look a longer method. Definitely, you don't have to learn this for the PUC exams. No one is going to ask you this. But I wanted to tell you how exactly this formula I equals integral of dm times r square is going to be useful. If I didn't give you any application of it, you would have considered this just as a formula. That is something I didn't want you to do that. So, if I have given a formula, I have to tell you how exactly it is going to be useful, and I have done that in this derivation. If you don't follow it, fine, just skip it. Next, let us consider the moment of inertia of some continuous bodies about the axes that have been mentioned in the slides. I have shown you, I'll show you a number of slides. In each slide, what is the body, which is the axis of spinning or rotation, and eventually what are its dimensions, what are its masses, everything I'll explain then and there itself. So, here we begin a list of moment of inertia of different uniform objects. We consider different objects and we shall list their moment of inertia formulae. Here we begin with a rod of length L and mass m. The axis, moment of inertia of a uniform thin rod of about an axis passing through its center and perpendicular to its length. So, the moment of inertia here is very simple. The moment of inertia here, first one, you might call it first one. Moment of inertia I equals ml square by 12. Just now I derived it. So, there is nothing surprising about it. Next, moment of inertia of a uniform thin rectangular plate about an axis passing through its center and perpendicular to its plane, as you can see in the diagram. Suppose m is the mass of this rectangular plate and A is the length of it, B is the width of it. Then moment of inertia about the axis shown there is 1 by 12 m times A square plus B square. Remember this by heart. Next one, moment of inertia for uniform solid cylinder or a disc like a CD disc, for example, about an axis passing through its center and along their central axis. Notice that these are the axes, like a CD disc, a cylinder. So, if each of them have mass m and radius r, mass m and radius r, then moment of inertia about their axis is simply mr square divided by 2, not 12, I am sorry, it is just 2, mr square by 2. The next one is moment of inertia of a uniform solid sphere like our own Earth spinning about its own axis. There, moment like sun for example, our own star, sun is spinning about its own axis all the time. So, massive sun is spinning about its own axis. What is the moment of inertia of that? Moment of inertia of a uniform solid sphere about an axis passing through its diameter. So, if r is the radius, m is the mass, moment of inertia of a solid sphere is given by I equals 2 over 5 mr square. Next one, we have moment of inertia of a hollow sphere. A hollow sphere, you can see I have taken a piece of it to show that inside there is nothing. It is a hollow one, like a football, tennis ball, etc. Not a hardball cricket, which is solid sphere. So it is like a tennis ball or table tennis ball or football or volleyball, all of that inside it is hollow. Suppose you spin it like the basketball you just saw earlier in the earlier slide. So if m is the mass, r is its radius, moment of inertia is slightly greater than for solid sphere. Solid sphere ಗೆ ಎಷ್ಟಿತ್ತೋ ಅದು 2 by 5 mr squared ಇತ್ತು. ಈಗ ನೀವು ಗಮನಿಸಬಹುದು I equals 2 by 3 mr square. 2 by 5 ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು 0.4 ಬರುತ್ತೆ. 2 by 3 ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು 0.67 ಬರುತ್ತೆ. Therefore, moment of inertia of a hollow sphere is greater than for solid sphere. Now the question is, I have a body such as this, a rigid body. It's a rigid body. Madam has already taught you what a rigid body is. This is a rigid body whose interparticle distances always remain constant, they don't change. Now, I know this is the center of mass of the body, and if I spin it about this axis, the moment of inertia I get is I naught. ಇದೊಂದು ರಿಜಿಡ್ ಬಾಡಿ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಆ ರಿಜಿಡ್ ಬಾಡಿಯನ್ನು ಈ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಸುತ್ತಲೂ ಅಕ್ಷದ ಸುತ್ತಲೂ ತಿರುಗಿಸಿದರೆ, ಭ್ರಮಣೆಗೆ ಒಳಪಡಿಸಿದರೆ ಅದರ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನರ್ಷಿಯಾ ಐ ನಾಟ್ ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. Suppose I have another axis, call this x dash, call this y dash. Y dash is parallel to x dash but separated by a certain perpendicular distance, call it h. Besides, you also know the mass of the object. Then the question is, if you know the moment of inertia about this axis, can we find the moment of inertia about the new axis? The formula says you can do so. You understand what I am saying? This is called parallel axis theorem. Now we come to parallel axis theorem. What does parallel axis theorem say? Simple. You know the moment of inertia of the body about this axis. What is the moment of inertia of the same body about a new axis parallel to the older axis and separated by a perpendicular distance of h? Here it is. If I naught is the moment of inertia of the rigid body, I'm sorry, I'm using shorthand notations, RB for rigid body, about any axis through the center of mass Cm, I is the moment of inertia of the rigid body about any other parallel axis if m is the mass of the rigid body, h is the perpendicular separation between parallel axis, then according to parallel axis theorem, we have total I equals I naught plus m times h square. I repeat, moment of inertia about this new axis is moment of inertia I naught about this axis plus the product of mass of the body times square of the perpendicular distance between the two parallel axes. Right, let us put this parallel axis theorem to use. I have already given you the formula for moment of inertia of a thin rod of mass m and length L about an axis passing perpendicular to the length. This is I naught, if you will, that is ml square divided by 12. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಇದೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಅಥವಾ ವೈ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಅಂತ ಕರ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಿ. ಇದು ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಮತ್ತು ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ಸು. ಈ ವೈ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದು ಎಕ್ಸ್ ಡ್ಯಾಶ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ಗೆ ಪ್ಯಾರಲ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಪಾಸಿಂಗ್ ಥ್ರೂ ದ ಎಂಡ್ ಆರ್ ದ ಎಡ್ಜ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ರಾಡ್. ಹೌ ಮಚ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನರ್ಷಿಯಾ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದಿಸ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್? ಫೈಂಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೋದಾ? ವೆರಿ ಈಸಿ. ಇನ್ವೋಕ್ parallel axis theorem. By parallel axis theorem, one can write total moment of inertia about the y dash axis is moment of inertia about x dash axis plus mass times square of the perpendicular distance between the two axes. Let's begin. I naught is already mentioned, m L square divided by 12 plus m. What is h here? What is h? H is obviously half the length, isn't it? This is L by 2. So I can plug in h equals L by 2 the whole square. Okay, let's simplify this. ml square by 12 plus, this is going to be ml square, 2 square is going to be 4. Now the LCM 12 and 4 lasa ಎಷ್ಟಾಗುತ್ತಪ್ಪ? 12 ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. 12 1 12 4 3 12 ಅಂದರೆ 4 ml ಸ್ಕ್ವೇರ್ ಡಿವೈಡೆಡ್ ಬೈ 12 ಏನೋ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. 4 1s 4 3s. ಹಾಗಿದ್ರೆ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನರ್ಷಿಯಾ ಅಬೌಟ್ ದ ನ್ಯೂ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಈಸ್ ml ಸ್ಕ್ವೇರ್ ಬೈ 3. ನೋಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಸಲೀಸಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಮೊಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಇನರ್ಷಿಯಾ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಮೂಲಕ ತನ್ನಿಂತಾನೆ ಬಂತು ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಅಡ್ವಾಂಟೇಜ್ ಆಫ್ ಪ್ಯಾರಲಲ್ ಆಕ್ಸಿಸ್ ಥಿಯರಮ್. Okay, now let's talk about a plane lamina. You know what a plane lamina is? It is a flat body like a piece of 5 rupee coin is a plane lamina. Now we have one such plane lamina here. Consider the plane lamina. It can be of any shape on the side, but on the top and bottom it must be flat. That's why it is called a plane lamina. It is called plane lamina. Now we shall consider 3 axes of rotation. One is x-axis like this, y-axis like that, and z-axis like this. Now if you know the moment of inertia, if you spin this like this about this axis, you know the moment of inertia Ix of this. If you spin this like this and you find the moment of inertia about that axis as Iy. If you spin the same thing about the z-axis, then you get the moment of inertia Iz like that. Then perpendicular axis theorem, the second axis theorem, perpendicular axis theorem states that the moment of inertia about an axis or moment of inertia of a plane lamina about an axis perpendicular to the plane is equal to the sum of moment of inertias about any two perpendicular axes passing in the plane of the lamina. You can see these two axes are passing in the plane of the lamina, so that the 3 axes meet at a single point. I repeat, the moment of inertia of a plane lamina about an axis perpendicular to its plane equals the sum of moment of inertias about any two mutually perpendicular axes passing in the plane of the lamina, so that 3 axes are intersecting at a single point. So this is very, very crucial for us to work with problems. Now let us consider, say, a disk of mass m, radius r, rotating about this vertical axis. We know the moment of inertia, if I call that z-axis, this is x-axis, this is y-axis, z-axis. I know moment of inertia about z-axis, which is mr square by 2. But first what I want is, I want the moment of inertia about the x-axis, ix. Fortunately, since it is the disk, moment of inertia about the z-axis and moment of inertia about the y-axis are the same. So therefore I can write ix equals iy, I do not know how much, I have to find out. Iz equals mr square by 2. First I have to find out this ix. What is this ix? You know, ix plus iy according to perpendicular axis theorem is given by iz, but ix equals iy, so ix plus ix becomes 2ix equals iz mr square by 2. That gives me ix equals mr square by 2 by 2, m r square divided by 4. That is not what I want. I want the moment of inertia about this axis, call it ix dash. Now in order to find ix dash, I already know ix, which is mr square by 4. Earlier I used perpendicular axis theorem, my dear students. Now we are going to use parallel axis theorem. By parallel axis theorem, we have ix dash equals ix plus m times h square. What is ix square? mr square by 4 plus m times h square. H is r itself. H is the perpendicular distance between two parallel axes, which is r. So mr square by 4 plus mr square, eventually when you equate it, you get m r square by 4, and there is 5 there. 5 mr square by 4 is the moment of inertia of the coin or a disk about an axis passing through the edge and parallel to the plane. I repeat, the moment of inertia of the disk about an axis passing along the edge and parallel to its diameter. I have here a tripod, a camera tripod, and there is a handle here. In order to move it up or move it down, I have a handle here. Notice that I have to rotate it this way, either to move it up or move it down. To rotate it, you can see I am applying the force. The force is being applied so that it is able to rotate. If I have to turn this way, again I have to apply a force. The greater the force that I apply tangentially, the greater the rotational effect. So that is true for everything else. Here there is a tiny knob. If you have to tighten it or loosen it, you have to apply a force. Two forces must be applied. And that happens because there is a sufficient friction in my thumb and finger so that I can rotate it back and forth. So you can do almost with anything. See here also. Usually we have taken all of these exercises for granted because that is regular mainstream thing. You take a tap and turn it on, take the tap and turn it off. In both the cases you have to set it in rotation. You need to apply force here. You need to apply force here. We encounter hundreds of examples in day-to-day life where we have to apply forces. Whether it is a nut that has to be removed from your car's wheel hub, or a nut that is fixed somewhere in your furniture, or it is a steering wheel when you are driving by your car, or the handlebar of your bicycle or motorbike, or it is a lid of a container, or it is a ceiling fan. Everywhere you require something to start or get it to rotate, and that physical quantity is called torque. So we are now going to talk about a very important physical quantity, torque, and it will be represented by a letter equivalent to T in English. This is Greek equivalent of T in English. This is called tau. From now on we shall apply this tau torque, T-O-R-Q-U-E. ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನು ಭ್ರಾಮಕಬಲ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೇವೆ. ಭ್ರಮಣೆಯನ್ನು ಉಂಟು ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಬಲ ಅಂತ ಅರ್ಥ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. So this torque, for example, if I consider the axis of rotation of the nut, if it turns anti-clockwise, the axis will be perpendicular to it. If it is turning clockwise also, the axis is passing perpendicular to the plane. Either way, I am going to apply a force at this point. Which direction shall I apply that force? Any direction is fine. I am going to apply the force in this direction. Now your experience tells you, if you apply, for example, the force not in this direction, but in this direction, if you pull that way, hold it and pull it, will it rotate? Will it rotate the nut? No, you won't be able to loosen it or tighten it. Same goes for the force in the opposite direction. Suppose you push the spanner or the wrench this way, there would be no rotation. But if you apply a force like this by pushing it this way or pulling it this way, this would have maximum rotational effect. The rotational effect of this force is called torque. Torque is called the rotational effect of the force. So here is the rotational axis passing through O. So at what point you have applied the force, that is indicated with the help of position vector, and we shall call it R vector. And the force in general need not be either perpendicular or parallel, that may be in this direction, that is F vector and R vector. This is the line of action of position vector. This is the line of action of the force vector. The smaller angle between the two is theta, like that. Now RF can be resolved into two components, this component and that component. If this is theta, this is F, this is F cosine theta, this is F sine theta. Second important thing, all of you know this. If you are opening the nut or loosening the nut of your bicycle wheel hub, you require a small wrench. If you are talking about motorbike, it would require a slightly longer one. If it is a car wrenches are this long. Truck, the wrenches are this long. So the bigger the nut, greater the effort you need, greater the torque you need, greater the length there will be. In other words, greater torque implies larger distance R. Greater torque implies greater force F. Greater torque also means greater this angle theta. Of course, this theta should neither be 0 nor be 180 degree. So when it is 90 degree, you will have maximum torque. So therefore, the torque of a force depends on three parameters. Torque tau should depend on force, no doubt about that. Torque must depend on the radial distance. The further you apply it, greater the torque is going to be. And finally, the torque is proportional to sine of the angle theta between the line of action of the position vector and line of action of the force vector. So, if I club all these three in a single equation, proportionality relation, tau is proportional to, first I'll write this, then I'll write this, then I'll write that, RF sine theta. I can replace this proportionality sign by invoking an equality sign, by invoking an proportionality constant, which can even include 1, therefore I have not written it separately, RF sine theta. The magnitude of the torque is given by this formula. This is magnitude of the torque. Magnitude of the torque. But R is a vector, F is a vector, torque is also a vector. So therefore, in general, you studied this in scalars and vectors, early chapter. Torque tau vector can be written as vector R cross vector F. Remember this formula by heart. Alright, now I am going to show you the same situation, except that you get a three-dimensional view of the whole thing. The nut and the wrench have been placed in a plane perpendicular to the plane of the board. And now rotation is anticlockwise. You are perhaps trying to rotate it anticlockwise. With a force in that direction, with the position vector like this, R. So R cross F. Notice that it tends to rotate it anticlockwise. Therefore, the torque is this way, anticlockwise. You know, I have shown you a screw there. If you apply, if you put this wrench over there or spanner over there and try to spin it anticlockwise, in which direction should the screw move? The screw should move upright. So even though you are rotating or spinning this wrench or what do you call this, spanner anticlockwise, the screw must move up. Therefore, the torque direction invariably, the direction of the torque is invariably upwards. You may notice that torque is always given by the direction of the plane perpendicular to R vector and F vector and given by what is called as right hand clasp rule. So here I'll mention right hand clasp rule, how exactly we can find the direction of the torque using right hand clasp rule. You can see here R vector and F vector must be first of all joined in common tail arrangement. First of all, join the two in common tail arrangement. Then look for the smaller angle. R vector is the first written vector in the expression torque equals R cross F. The first written vector must be allowed to rotate towards the second written vector F. Then thumb, you can look at the thumb. Thumb is pointing upward. That would be the direction of the torque. We already got the torque direction earlier also. Now this right hand clasp rule, this is called right hand clasp rule. Clasp means hold. ಗಟ್ಟಿಯಾಗಿ ಹಿಡಿದು ಬಿಗಿದಾಗಿ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ನಾವು ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಪ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. So we saw torque is given by Rf sin theta. Now if R is equal to 0, what do you mean by R is equal to 0? If you apply the force here itself, right at the axis itself, will it rotate? Surely not. Instead of pushing the spanner at this point, you push the spanner right here. R is equal to 0. When R is equal to 0, it would not spin it, it would not rotate it, it would not be able to loosen or tighten the nut. If that is the case, torque would be 0. So R is equal to 0. If R is equal to 0, torque is 0. Then what if force itself is 0? So that is a very petty situation. I am not going to consider that. It is 0 if theta is equal to 0. You know why? When theta is equal to 0, sin theta equals 0, torque equals 0. That means if you apply the force definitely at the end here, but parallel to R vector, R and F vector are parallel to each other, theta equals 0. No rotation at all. Fine. It is 0 if theta equals 180 degree. Oh, when is that? When the force is this way, R is opposite. Then theta equals 180 degree. That means when you are pushing the wrench across the nut is not going to rotate or spin. So torque is going to be 0. The torque is going to be maximum if you are pushing it perpendicular to arm. This is R cap. This is F vector. That angle is 90 degree. Then you will have maximum torque, because when theta equals 90 degrees, sin theta attains maximum value which is equal to 1. Therefore, it is Rf, which is called maximum torque if theta equals 90 degrees. So natural question is, what is the SI unit of torque? SI unit of torque, very easy. That of force, Newton. That of meter, that of distance, which is meter, is Newton meter. Even though in previous chapter you were told Newton meter is equal to joule when it comes to work, here it will be simply called as Newton meter and not joule. Second, dimensional formula of the torque of the torque. This is Newton, M L T to the power minus 2 times meter L. So M L into L, M L square. So that's going to be M L square T to the power minus 2. And finally, torque is what kind of quantity? Already we have represented torque tau equals R cross F given by the vector product of R and F, and therefore this should be a vector. So torque is a vector quantity. Torque is a vector quantity. All right. Now we have a wheel here which is capable of rotating about this axis perpendicular to the plane of the figure. Clockwise or anti-clockwise, we have to find it ourselves. Suppose the force here is 2 Newton, 5 newtons, 2 root 2 Newton, 5 Newton, 10 Newton. So some of these forces acting at the rim or the edge of the wheel try to rotate it clockwise. Some of these forces try to rotate it anti-clockwise. One of the easiest ways to find the torque is, let us say the radius here is 1 meter and this angle is 45 degrees. The torque of the force is easy to find. It is a force times perpendicular distance. For this, it is force times radius. For this one, again force times radius. For this one, force times radius. But here we have slightly a difficult thing in the sense the force is not perpendicular to the radius. In this case though, we can resolve it into two components, one along the tangent, another one along the radius. So, this is the tangential direction like that, and the radial direction like that. Now this is 2 root 2 Newton, and this angle is 45 degree. You can easily prove that, because this angle is 45 degree. You can continue. This angle is also 45 degree, this angle is also 45 degree, this angle is also 45 degree. This is going to be 2 root 2 cos 45 is 1 by root 2, 1 by root 2, root 2 cancels out, thus 2 Newton. This is 2 Newton. Likewise, this is 2 root 2 sin 45 is also 1 by root 2, root 2 cancel out, giving you 2 Newton. So this single force, 2 root 2 Newton, is equivalent to two simultaneous forces. One is 2 Newton like this, another 2 Newton like this. One tries to press the wheel along its radius, another one tries to push it along the tangent. So now we have greater clarity now. This force tries to rotate it clockwise. This force also tends to rotate it clockwise. This tends to rotate it anti-clockwise. A component of that tends to rotate it anti-clockwise. And this force does nothing at all. You know why? This force is opposite to the radius vector. In fact, it only tries to push it along the radius, no rotation. Imagine having to push this wheel like this. There would be no rotation at all. So torque of 2 Newton force is 0. We have to find the torque of 5 Newton force, torque of 10 Newton force, and torque of this 2 root 2 Newton force. Okay, we shall consider any torque that tends to rotate it clockwise as positive, any torque that tends to rotate the wheel anti-clockwise as negative. So, what is the total torque? Total torque acting is, we have considered the torque of this 5 Newton force as clockwise. And how to find the torque? Very easy. Multiply the force with the perpendicular distance, which is plus 5 times perpendicular distance is 1 meter. 1 meter. Radius is 1 meter. Plus this force that tends to rotate it clockwise. So therefore, force times perpendicular distance, 10 times 1. However, this force is not very easy to understand, but it can have two components. One component tries to push it this way, one component tries to push it this way, which is 2 Newton force. This force tends to rotate it anti-clockwise. So it is 2 times 1, not 2 root 2, mind you. and this force contributes to no torque whatsoever. You know why? Imagine these forces were not there, only this force was there. It would simply push the wheel along the radius and it would not cause any rotation. Therefore, the torque of that force is 0. I have not considered in my equation. Leave it. 5 times 1, 5 plus 10 times 1, 10, 15 minus 2, that gives you 13 Newton meter. This is the net torque acting on the rigid body.